It is Wednesday. We are wizards. And it is Wizard Wednesday. Channeling in with quantum style through the quantum downs. This is Elf.
And Dota.
What's up?
Hello.
There he is.
Sorry, I was just dancing to the music, so I couldn't accept my invite up to the stage.
Yeah, Dota, what is this music?
This is When You're Smiling by the Blue Vipers of Brooklyn. Jazz standard.
It's great. Dota, you are so much more knowledgeable about music than I am, and yet I've been in charge of the intro music for like almost a year now.
You know, it's good to mix it up. There's a lot of different beautiful music out there.
Just
Yeah,
just
for
wait,
sure.
just wait until you pass the baton to me. We're gonna be listening to some death metal. Top of Wizard
Yeah,
Wednesday.
perfect.
Awesome. Okay, welcome everybody. We have a really big show today. We're gonna dive into a media critique of Rings of Power and House of the Dragon. But first, I want to just give some updates and answer questions from the cult. Dota, do you have a DAO update, actually?
Yeah, so the DAO update is we are very, very close. We were trying to get the legal in order by September. We've just had a couple more forms sent back our way. One of them I actually just sent back within the hour. So yeah, we're close. We're on target to have it set up formally in October. So we're super close there.
I can't wait. I can't wait for some of that service funds to be deployed. And there's so many great proposals and things that have already been greenlit.
You wouldn't even believe how much work it is, and really kudos goes out to Reptar, Jitsi, retired yield farmer, Slick Chick, just so many people in the DAO have like contributed to kind of getting this paperwork in order, and like it's crazy. We're like working on it every single week. Some of the like best people in the community, and it's like still taking us this long. Jeez Louise. So at the end, we're going to have kind of, a watertight a DAO, which is really important, right? We all saw last week, was it? There was, basically there was a UkiDAO, right? So the CFTC, they they fined UkiDAO, right, because they didn't like that they were doing basically options on chain. I think it was like leverage on chain. And but then they went even farther to like individually kind of prosecute all of the people who voted in governance because they didn't have a formal structure in place. They basically said that anyone who voted in governance was this sort of like unincorporated partner, and then is like basically, if you don't show up to court in like California or something when they do it, then you like lose automatically. So it's this like really, well, one, it's like complete judicial overreach from the CFTC, but at the same time, as an individual, it's really scary that you might like vote in something and then all of a sudden you're like liable just because you own these tokens, right? And like maybe you have no consequences, but like just having to deal with it could be like very expensive. So all that to say, everything that we are putting in place, we have some of the best counsel in the world. We have all of our like paperwork in order. So we should have that kind of really buttoned up by the end of October.
Thank you, Dota. Thank you to the House of Wizards.
Yep. Okay, next question. I saw a question about the Book of Lore. Someone was asking if the archive feature is live. Yeah, apparently Niski, just without even me knowing, just like totally implemented that. So the archive feature is working in the Book of Lore. If you don't know what that is, so it's it's kind of it was really a pretty big deal, like deciding to do it, whether or not to do it, and then actually doing it. It's basically this idea that you own a wizard or a warrior and you can write that character's lore. But if you sell that character, the lore obviously travels with it to the new owner. And so now this new owner will have lore already attached to that character. So the question is, like, should that lore stay forever? Should the owner be able to just totally delete it? or is there a good third option where they can archive it? And we settled on the archive feature, and that is actually live in the Book of Lore at this moment. As for future developments for the Book of Lore, it's always growing, it's always expanding, it's always being developed for. And so, yeah, I mean, I think Dota and I both, well, really everyone wants just we want it to be easier to use. We want to improve the UI, the UX. We want to make it easier to just edit and write. So those are sort of the next things we want to do with the Book of Lore.
Yeah, the Book of Lore, I think who was it? Someone mentioned it even this morning, which was that like the ergonomics of it being this like book format is fun and cute, but kind of hard to use. And so the Book of Lore needs like an overhaul. The font needs to be more readable. It needs to have like more discovery UI, right? In terms of like
Yep.
curated lore, popular lore. And those are I just think are like requirements. There's like just make it easier to use.
Yep.
And then from there, I think that there's like a lot of things that we talk a lot about internally, which is like, how do we better deal with lore that involves multiple characters? How do we better deal with lore for the whole world? How do we like encourage more long form lore? And that doesn't mean that you have to like write a novel, right? Like, are there tools that we could build around like, making comics or making maps or like being able to have this kind of like structured storytelling or screenplays or like structured format that makes it easy to kind of like not fill in the blanks, but at least like not be staring at a blank page. And so I think that's something we're really going to work on this year is thinking about how to do longer form storytelling because we're working on main threads through all the things we talk about every week, but um, the community has to be able to tell their own main threads, and the Book of Lore is like V1, but there's more that we can do.
Yep. And then Emma was asking about IRL parties, which I feel like Emma asks this every week, and we don't have anything planned like at the moment. But damn, Emma, I wish you would have been at the NYC NFT party. That was legendary.
It was fun.
So yeah, that's all we have for now. And then Emma also asked what I personally was working on. I am working on the Halloween event that we have coming up, which I think we're going to announce more in detail next week. But Dota, do you want to say anything about it right now?
Yes, but we've talked about it and we said, oh, let's talk about it next week. So I have to sit here. And so I have so much I want to say. I want to spill all the beans 100%, but you're going to have to come back next week. What I can tell you is that like, so I was realizing I haven't like tweeted so much or just I've been coding. I've been so deep in code. We're doing an event for Halloween and we're doing an event shortly thereafter. And we've just been like, coding and painting, and the whole team has been pulling really hard, and I think everyone's going to love it. But let's spill the beans next week.
Yep. Yeah, you said something that triggered a thought in my head. The whole team has been working really hard. Side note, our team is just awesome. I was telling Bear and Dota just the other day that I just feel like we are firing on all cylinders right now. We've got the 3D team just kicking ass. We've got a couple people on our team who are just doing dev work that are kicking ass. The Halloween event is kicking ass. We've got a mini game in the works that's just really coming along. It's just
we've got social and community team is like really working hard to put everything together.
Mm-hmm. Comic books,
publishing,
physical items, TPD, the TV show, like all these, like it's like a lot of people talk about like the bear markets for building, and I think a lot of people just say that to like for whatever reason they may have, but like it really feels like we're taking the opportunity just to build, which is great.
Yeah, I think that like I don't know how other projects do it, but like at Magic Machine, there's 13 of us who have like a full-time job who are just like working all day, every day, all week, just to like build on wizards. And so, yeah, there's a team. So we now have 3 people working full time on 3D models, right?
Yep.
I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4 developers. Yeah, so we're just, and it just feels like we're all getting, etc. And we're all getting like very coherent as a team, getting better organizing, prioritizing, and there's just an infinite amount of things we want to build, and so just taking them one at a time.
Yep, it is a well-oiled magic machine. We also have the sold walk cycles. I'm gonna say they're almost done.
Nice.
And I mean, I say almost, and it might still be like another week or two, but I mean, it's almost done. And it's been a long time coming, and like not only are these almost done, but you will be able to actually use these walk cycles in a thing. That's all I'm going to say now. And then another update. Someone asked about the comic. So issue 1 is we already did issue 0. Okay, so issue 1 is still being drawn and colored, and then issue 2 and 3 are in the writing stages. Issue 2 is probably almost totally written. And then I just got a draft for number 3 the other day. So yeah, the comic is well on its way. Anything you want to say about that, Bear, Dota?
Gosh, I think again, there'll be Web3 moves faster than every other industry that we work with. So I probably sound like I'm repeating myself, but we have some really cool distributor news that should be coming up soon about people that are going to help us get the comic book out in a really awesome way. So that's exciting.
Yep. Yeah. And I also want to say that issues 2 and 3 deal with different characters from issues 0 and 1. So yeah. And then finally, I want to say, speaking of comics, cult members Artsy and Daniela Illustra, I think we announced this last week or maybe the week before. They are making a comic, and they are asking for cult members to volunteer to have their wizards appear in this comic. And Artsy just DM'd me and said there's like 65 characters already signed up, which is amazing. And apparently, there's still time to get yours in. I think Artsy told me that the deadline is next Wizard Wednesday. So if you want your character to appear in this comic, just DM Artsy. Okay, I think that's all the updates that I have. Dota Bear, any updates from you guys?
No, I'm just like coding every day.
Coding Dota is different than other kind of Dota.
Yeah. There's like high level, like executive, I like think about big ideas, make big plans, formulate theories about the world, make tweet storms. Like I'm very like deliberate about like the big picture and what I'm doing 5 years, 10 years out. And then there's like coding Dota who's just like, writing unit tests and solidity functions and like, I can't think 5 minutes beyond my own faith. So you get coding Dota today.
Yeah, and then coding Dota is also like I need 4-hour periods where I can't be bothered.
And
then I send them really annoying DMs just to mess with them.
Yeah. Don't message me. Don't invite me to a meeting. Don't talk to me. Don't ask me to fill out legal forms for the DAO.
That was specific, yeah.
Awesome. Well, did you guys do your homework? Let's talk Rings of Power and House of Dragon. What do you think?
All right, yeah, let's do it.
Go.
And if anyone who has watched these shows, please feel free to come up because you don't need to listen just the 3 of us the whole time. We'd love to have kind of more folks participate. So yeah,
100%.
Ask to speak, please.
Yeah. Anyone's welcome to come up. So I'm gonna give a few thoughts beforehand. There's 2, I guess, component ways that I'm sort of there's 2 lenses through which I'm looking at these shows, and one is it's believability in sci-fi and fantasy. And the reason this is important, so I've been reading this book about Miyazaki, the like sort of the genius behind the Studio Ghibli. Obviously, a master storyteller, especially in the realm of fantasy and sci-fi. And one of the things that makes his films so great is that it's not so much in him creating these imaginal and fictional things. It's that he's making these imaginary and fictional things believable. Um, he's bringing this audience into this willing suspension of disbelief. And it's not that you're making things realistic; it's that you're making things believable. And so an example is like, well, in Game of Thrones or House of Dragon, it's like the dragons are not real. Everybody knows that. But the way they're depicted, it makes you think that they could be real. There's like believable traits, and they're depicted in a believable way. And so when you take your elements of fantasy and you depict them in a believable way, it's magical. It really brings the audience in. Um, and so it's the believability angle that I want to put on this, but then also there's the just the world building angle. And as I was thinking about this today, I sort of defined like three types of world builders. There's the original creator, obviously, which let's just take Lord of the Rings. The original world builder is J.R. Tolkien, and then there's the what I'm calling the talented and faithful torchbearer, which would be like Peter Jackson when he did the Lord of the Rings films. And then there's what I'm calling the corporate hack with financial motives, and that would be Amazon. Um, and, and but I think Forgotten Runes is pioneering a fourth kind of world builder. And at the moment, I'm going to call it the living avatar. This is the creator who is also the creation. They literally own and embody the character that they develop for. And this type of world builder is they create effortlessly, and because they are the creation, the art and the artist is one and the same. And this is why I believe anyone can create for Forgotten Runes, because you just have to be yourself and speak your truth. Um, but obviously, that fourth type does not come into play with Lord of the Rings and Rings of Power. We're dealing with the first three. And so that's another lens that I want to look at Rings of Power and House of Dragon with. Um, but yeah, I think let's start with Rings of Power. Doder, Bear, or Jitsi, or Locke, do you guys want to start with Rings of Power?
Not all at once.
Nope.
Yeah, seriously.
I don't want to.
I mean,
I don't want to
I can
open. It's
totally
all
start.
you. Yeah, please. No, thank you. Appreciate it. But go ahead.
Yeah, I more have like comments about like both of them and like how they're world building in different ways. So if we
Yeah,
want to start show specific, then we can. But I just have like an overarching sort of like perspective. I think that
yeah, go
Rings
for
of
it.
Cool. Yeah, I think that Rings of Power is like visually captivating. I do think that it's a little bit of a long or slow burn, just because there isn't like I don't feel like the character development is as strong as House of Dragons. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
House of Dragons is super intricate in storytelling. Like you feel a lot more emotionally connected to the characters, whereas Rings of Power, in the first episode, I felt very like connected to the main character, but I also feel like that is sort of like a cliche archetype. Um, there are few cliche archetypes, in my opinion, in Rings of Power, and I'm trying to like
Mm-hmm.
walk on eggshells. That's not to like spoil anything for anyone,
Yeah.
but I'm like captivated visually by Rings of Power, so I can sit through it just because like some of the scenes are like absolutely gorgeous, especially that like first scene where she's like creating that magical like paper swan.
Yep.
Um, so I feel like emotionally I was set up for like House of Dragons energy, but that did not follow through. Whereas House of and I feel like with Rings of Power, there are the moments of change, or like moments in when I become more invested in the show, are like these overarching, like, you know, moments. Whereas in House of Dragons, like episode to episode, there are these very small, intricate moments that aid to the world building, but also the character development.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because for me, I'm all caught up on Rings, but I've been like stuck on the first episode of Dragons, and I think it's because I don't know if I've been distracted, or like just I feel like Rings is a little bit more of a casual viewing experience, if that makes sense. Like I can I'm not like I feel like when you're watching Dragons, you have to lean in, you have to pay attention to every single word spoken, because there's going to be callbacks to those motivations and those like side conversations, and it just feels more matrixed and layered, and so I don't know. I think maybe just mentally, I'm enjoying the lean back experience of Rings.
Right. Yep. I agree. It's for me, Rings of Power is a little bit more in the territory of mindless entertainment. If you lower your expectations and treat it like a casual TV show, it's definitely watchable. There are moments that are very enjoyable, I think. But it also feels like a TV executive's sanitized take on the source material. But if you just accept that filter, then the show can be fairly amusing. I find that the times that I enjoy it the most are when there's like direct references to Tolkien's Legendarium, which basically just means I love it when they actually lean into Tolkien, and I don't love it when the executives try to create something new. But like I'm trying to like catch myself. I'm constantly asking, like, am I letting my love of the Tolkien canon distract me from enjoying the show on its own merits? I think that's the question like every Tolkien fan has to ask themselves if they're going to watch this show.
It's really difficult to like get over that cognitive bias, because you could say the same for House of Dragons in terms of the fact that there's like so many little nuggets from Game of Thrones.
Yep. Yeah. But I, as far as I know, and I could be wrong, I think House of Dragon is based and more faithfully follows the source material, because like Rings of Power is totally based. Apparently, it's only based on the appendices in the Lord of the Rings. It's not based on the Silmarillion. It's not based on Lord of the Rings. It's not based on the Hobbit. It's just the appendices, which is such little source material from which to create an entire TV show. And that's probably why everybody's saying this is not Tolkien at all, because it really isn't. But yeah, it's if you forget about the books, I find that the scenes with like Elrond and Durin can be kind of fun. I'm really intrigued by the man with the beard who fell from the sky and like trying to figure out who he is. The whole Mithril storyline is kind of interesting. It's to me, it's really kind of fun to see this nomadic breed of hobbit, which is very unlike the homebody hobbits of the Shire. These are kind of fun things that I'm kind of enjoying. Another thing I'm noticing, and this is going to get very nerdy, but the very beginning, the whole intro sequence, the whole title sequence to Rings of Power. I think I know what the symbolism is behind this. Okay, this is going to get super nerdy.
More nerdy.
Yeah, in the Tolkien Legendarium, so all the gods who created like the whole world, Tolkien describes this creation sequence as singing the world into existence. So there's like this musical element in the story of creation. And when you watch the intro sequence to Rings of Power, it's clearly like music and sound that is forming these little grains of sand, which are essentially components of Earth. My guess is that's what they're trying to communicate. Music bringing this world and this story into existence. So I don't know. That was kind of cool. Um, if you wanted to carry that further, though, and this is again going to get even more nerdy, the whole base conflict in Lord of the Rings is one of the gods. His name is Morgoth. He's like, I don't know, the Tolkien archetype of Satan. Um, Morgoth does not want to sing with the rest of the gods, and so he causes discord. He sings his own song, and so he splits away from all these gods. And I'm going to compare Morgoth to Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos wants to sing his own song and create his own Lord of the Rings. And that's why Rings of Power might feel a little discordant, because Bezos has broken away from the music of Tolkien. So that's sort of my meta take on what's happening here.
It's deep.
But yeah, and then as far as the aesthetics is like, yeah, Locke, I totally agree with you. So many of the scenes are just beautiful. It's just really, really well composed. You can tell a lot of like artists who worked on this show really enjoyed what they were doing. Um, on the flip side, though, I do feel like a lot of the CG is pretty apparent, especially in terms of lighting and atmosphere. The lighting feels often very flat, especially in the scenes in Linden. There's like no atmosphere at all. The forest feels like a stage. The lighting feels like stage lighting. Um, these are areas where I think the aesthetics really break down, and the whole artifice really shows through, and it takes me out of the believability. It takes me out of the world building. The world just feels kind of artificial. The same can be said for the hair and the costumes. Like, Elrond, your hair is too perfect, man. Um, you know,
I
even
agree 100%.
yeah, and even like the nomadic hobbits, like they should look very dirty, and yet the little like plant ornaments they put in their hair is just like often way too perfect. It's too styled. They do not look like they belong to the earth.
Yeah, I have a huge problem with the hair, but we won't go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, but anyway, those are my main takes on Rings of Power. I'd love to hear Bear, Dota, Jitsi, your takes.
It's too glowy. I have this thing whenever I watch shows that are usually on ABC, NBC, or Prime Television. I can tell within the first 5 minutes if I'm going to enjoy the aesthetics and where the depth of creativity is, and usually it falls flat every single time if it has that glowy effect. It's pretty accurate, and it really drives me crazy. I'm a Game of Thrones maxi, so I've like actually dodged the New Lord of the Rings because I thought it was going to be bad in general. I've heard mixed reviews. So like you said, there's probably like a lot of fun within certain particular things. But like I like to dive into my fantasy and like really pick it apart and have to watch it through. And you know what it comes down to is the characters in the Game of Thrones world are so motivated by certain things that you'd never seen Lord of the Rings. And I find it so enticing what they do to make decisions that you know what they did really great that like Lord of the Rings does perfectly in their own way too, is which they had like the whole evil versus good, and they created that over the course of however many years, and it's been great, fantastic, and we know that line that's being crossed when it happens. With Game of Thrones, everybody's a villain, everybody's a hero at any given point, and I adore that. Like that is something that I think is true character development and gives depth to this not only scenery but creativity of world too, when people are doing things based off what is good for them and their family and friends around them, and that is why they make decisions. And then in Lord of the Rings, you kind of have the opposite, which is the true hero, the true villain, but it is motivated, but it's hard to believe that like someone does something right every single time when it comes to an important decision in a fantasy-based world, right? So it's just like comparing apples and oranges, and I seem to really like the oranges that are over at Game of Thrones and House of Dragon.
I totally feel you, Jitsi. I'm going to do a big. Well, I have a lot to say about the characters of House of Dragon, and you're definitely hitting on what I was going to say. But But yeah, I want to hold on for just a sec. It looks like Big Bridge and Zayla Soul, you guys came up. Big Bridge, what's up, man?
Oh, hey guys, thanks for hosting this super geeky space.
Yeah.
You're gonna need to stop me if I geek too hard right now. I've got kind of like a media theory perspective on this, and it kind of clicked when you were giving your introduction. So the main lens that I look at most media through these days is centralized versus decentralized, particularly because I feel really staked in the Web3 community now. I'm always looking for that decentralized flavor to everything. So when it comes to the production of both Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, they're both centralized around the creations of very well established authors in the realm. George R. R. Martin, Tolkien.
Yep.
And now we're experiencing these derivatives that are recreated by new authors and new creators.
Yep.
And so you're starting to decentralize from those centralized works. So, straight to Jitsy's last point, HBO has a brand built around no clear villains or heroes. That's part of HBO's brand. If you watch The Wire, if you watch Sopranos, there's always dark, there's always light at the same time. So they capture that really well in Game of Thrones. And George R. R. Martin's work, if you read all his novels from the very beginning, you're interested in all the characters because they have very human motives. So yeah, I think this is a great piece of homework to have for you guys' decentralized project. Collaboration is your main throughput, and yeah, thanks. That's pretty much my whole spew.
That's one of the reasons why I love Ghibli movies versus, let's say, like Disney movies too. You have this same dichotomy in terms of motivation, where like in Disney movies, you have like Cinderella, and you have like the evil witch, and sort of you have this like very clear good versus evil. There's a good side, there's a bad side. Whereas with like Ghibli's movies, there's almost always like three different factions, and they kind of change alliances throughout the movie. So if you look at like Castle in the Sky, right, it opens up with the girl, I think is like Sheeta and Pazu, they're like running from the grandmother Dola, who's like, like the minecart scene where they're like, she's got her crew and they're, shooting after them on the minecarts and they're running away. But then like by the end of the movie, they're allies against basically like a third enemy. And so, yeah, I love that like depth of character of what Jitsi was saying, which is around this idea that like, each person's incentive is around like protecting themselves and their family, and that means like who you're allied with outside of that can shift like during the progression of the story.
Absolutely. Zayla Soul, what's up, man?
What's up? Yeah, so I've watched all of the Game of Thrones, and I've been working on watching Lord of the Rings, but like my only hang up is like it kind of feels like a different world. It's a little foreign to like the kind of Tolkien we're used to as far as like the classic movies. Like now they have these like new hobbits that are walking around that have like never been mentioned before in like the older Lord of the Rings. So I don't know, it just kind of feels like a different, like narrative that's going on, I guess.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, again, like these are based on the appendices in the Lord of the Rings, which is like, I don't know, like 12 pages maybe. And just to be fair, I do think this particular breed of hobbit, they're called stores, is mentioned in the appendices. If you allow me to nerd out for like a fifth time, um, but yeah, it's or maybe it's Harfoot. Somebody's correcting me in the chat. I don't know, but Tolkien does explicitly mention like three different types, distinct types of hobbits. But still, like there's not much beyond that, and the writers at Amazon certainly have to take a lot of creative license to sort of develop it with their own artistic license. But yeah, so you're not digging it, Zay?
I mean, I'm working through it. I mean, it's too early to formulate like a final opinion on it. But I mean, as far as like the Tolkien I grew up with, it just kind of feels a little foreign. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, like, there's still a lot of similarities, equals to like the former shows that were running, and yeah, they're both under different directors and things like that. So there's some compare and contrast there. But yeah, I'm kind of feeling the Game of Thrones a lot more. But as far as the world building for the Tolkien, it's really cool because you get some really far out there things, like you said, like the man falling from the sky. Some of these like new breeds of like races with Game of Thrones, it seems a lot more like realistic. So I mean that's really cool that they're able to do that, but you see a lot less of it seems.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like comparatively, one show, like for me, Rings of Power is like follow this journey, whereas House of Dragon is like choose your journey based on like whatever character you favor. Yeah.
Fun. Bear, did you already? You said you've been watching. I guess you started this whole conversation. But yeah, okay. Let's jump to House of Dragon. So I mean, again, it's a lot more source material to derive from. I think it's based on Fire and Blood, which is like an entire several hundred-page novel. So the writers right off the bat just had a lot more source material to work with. The story in House of Dragon, what I'm finally realizing is that it's far, far simpler than Game of Thrones, um, because it only deals with one family, the Targaryens, whereas Game of Thrones dealt with families all over Westeros. And I guess it should have been evident to me because it's all literally in the title. Game of Thrones is literally about political games between all the different thrones in Westeros, and House of Dragons is literally about the one dragon family, and not much else. And it all takes place in King's Landing. Um, and again, also speaking of opening credits, like the opening credits of Game of Thrones went all over the entire map of Westeros and showed all these different families, whereas the opening credits of the Targaryen of House of Dragon, it's like showing this flowing all over this like weird structure and interacting with all these different sigils, which I guess represent these different families. But it's always the Targaryen blood. So yeah, I mean I guess that would be my comparison to Game of Thrones. It's I think because it deals with this royal family, it's not as relatable. None of us on this call are royal, as far as I know, so it feels more elitist. It feels a little.
Speak for yourself, Elf.
Yeah, except for Queen Locke, the rest of us are mere peasants. But yeah, again, unlike Game of Thrones, which dealt with many social classes, House of Dragon is like just this elite family. However, House of Dragon is more compelling TV, and I think here's why. It's got the same realistic edge that Game of Thrones did. It's it's gritty, it's filthy, it's got atmosphere, it's got dim lighting, it's raw. All of this was carried over from Game of Thrones. It's like it's so great because they spend like millions of dollars on these sets and these costumes, and then they just bathe them in darkness and you can't even see it. And that is beautiful. Whereas like with Rings of Power, it's like you get the sense that the director, they're like, we spent millions of dollars on this set and we have to show it. So let's light the entire thing. Whereas House of Dragon does not care. And that's what makes it so engaging because it just feels so real. As far as character development, yes, even though these are like elite royals, the whole story is really just about their base human desires, sexuality, greed, bloodlust. These are all base human desires that every human being knows and understands and deals with. And what makes Game of Thrones and House of Dragons so interesting is because you take these base human qualities and then you show the catastrophic effect that these things can have on entire nations. And so that, to me, that's why it's so great because, George R. R. Martin, he understands the human condition. And, it's, these things are sort of lacking in Rings of Power. It's like, I don't really understand Galadriel, what makes her human. I don't understand what makes Elrond human. And maybe that's the point, because they're not humans, they're elves. But yeah, anyway, I'm ranting. Bear, Dota, Jitsi, Zay, comments on House of Dragon?
I don't know. I just like the narrative. It's super compelling, and you're emotionally driven and emotionally invested by some of the decisions they go on. And I feel like they don't have as much killing as in like the last go around, but they say if you have the 3 Fs in any good cinematic movie, it'll have an effect on the crowd, and that's food, fighting, and fucking. So they do plenty of that.
I have never heard that, but that is genius.
In fantasy, so I guess there's 4 Fs.
Zay, I'm going to relay that to our comic book writer after Wizard Wednesday. That's fantastic. Yeah, Jitsi, Locke, give a hoot. You just came up.
Hey, how's it going, everyone?
Hey.
Happy Wizard Wednesday. So I'm just gonna come out. I didn't do my homework. I'm a terrible student. I'm gonna go to detention. But I have I guess a unique perspective. I mean, I've heard what you've been saying about House of Dragons. I like most people loved like the first 5 seasons of Game of Thrones, and then was very, very intensely disappointed by the final seasons, right? And so I took that as like I can't unforget how mad I was at how the show ended, leading, at the very end and also leading up to it, right? Like the show has completely changed. It went from like this amazing gritty story to like a Marvel movie. Like,
yep.
And hey, I love Marvel movies for what they are, but that's not why I was watching Game of Thrones. So, so is everyone here kind of saying that, like House of Dragons is different than those final seasons? Like, and is it kind of
House of Dragons is good.
Okay.
It's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Hard to compare, because I agree with you, Hoot. Like, the last few seasons of Game of Thrones were a disappointment, I think, for a lot of people. But this one seems to be really in sync with what it's trying to accomplish, and as long as it isn't just like, I mean, it's season 1 though, right? Who knows how long it goes? But
and it's pretty different too, right? Like it's a lot less like gruesome. It's a lot less sadistic. It's
right.
And it's a lot more focused on just sort of one family, right? And like, the King Viserys, he basically starts out, and you're like not really sure, like, is he good? Is he bad? Is he? And really, what you just sort of find as it goes is like, he's just trying to do his best for what's for his family. He's flawed, and I think that they do a good job at kind of like showing the ins and outs of what that might mean as the king. And but I do hear what you're saying, Alf, around this idea that it's a bit like elitist. Like that was kind of the reason why I could never really get into like Succession, because it was sort of this like rich people problems. Like it was like a less funny Arrested Development, right? Where you're just like, you guys are all fighting over who gets your dad's company. Like I just can't get into that.
Yeah, no, it's true. I'm not attracted to stories with elitist characters that often, but I mean, to me, the way you write them in an engaging way is you have to give them the exact same base needs, wants, and desires as every other human on Earth. And to me, where elitist drama becomes interesting is then you show how those base desires have catastrophic effect on whole societies and nations. And that's House of Dragon.
I don't know if this is a spoiler or not, but like I love that the like time progression. Like I always love stories that kind of are told over like a long period of time. Like there's that Ethan Hawke film. What is it? It's like Before Sunset, Before Sunrise, where they basically have a series of, it's a series of movies where it's basically just just the two of them talking for the whole movie, and then the story progresses over the like whatever it is, 4 movies, by decades, and I love that. It's like very kind of a risky choice to be able to kind of like show characters over that long period of time, and I think that's really engaging.
Yep. Big Bridge, you had your hand up a second ago.
Oh yeah, Gibahoot just brought up one of the main talking points I hear people go at Game of Thrones for, which is like the audience expectations from the first 5 seasons, and then it just not meeting those expectations as it moved to wrap the whole thing up, because George R. R. Martin never wrote those books. So they had to figure out, how do we wrap this up? How do we, move on to the next thing? We've passed the source material. So yeah, I just find it like really interesting talking point in relation to managing your audience expectations and just figuring out where your work ends and after having such popularity.
Yep, for sure. And that's probably why House of Dragons is so good, because now they have George R. R. Martin's source material to work with again. Nard, what's up, man?
Hey, Colt. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Great. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on House of Dragons. I really like that show. And you brought up an interesting point about just the grittiness of it. I'm just wondering, how important do you think the visuals are for like captivating an audience? Because I think equally the storyline and the plot of Game of Thrones and House of Dragons is just equally compelling. So, I mean, if it was like lit up and if the effects were all seen, do you think that it would not have done as well?
That's an interesting question. I mean, when I say grittiness, I'm certainly talking about like the visual grittiness, but I'm also talking about like the character grittiness. Like, these characters have grit and filth, and they act in very amoral ways. And so, I mean, the grittiness as it operates on all those levels certainly adds an edge of believability, but if it was all lit and cleaned and everybody had nice haircuts, would it be as good? I mean, obviously the storylines and the characters would remain intact, but no, I think it would certainly distract from the excellent storylines.
Yeah, I don't know if you watched the Sandman series, or Sandman series, but I feel like that was a series that was very gritty in plot and concept and themes, but I mean, everyone had perfect hair.
Yeah.
So
The
it
glowy
basically
effect.
detracted a bit from the overall impact, but I still watched it, and I would probably recommend the cult to watch it because it's really good storytelling.
Yep.
I keep on thinking of Star Wars. Like, Star Wars is like the prime example of like what could have been but isn't going to be. Maybe I upset people with that statement, but if like HBO got the rights to Star Wars and applied what they're doing with Game of Thrones into the Star Wars universe, we'd have a really great Star Wars. In my opinion, recent Star Wars have fallen really flat. The best one is actually Solo. Well, I like Solo because the very beginning you adventure into like the depths of like that gangster town where you like run into that huge like alien mob boss there for like 5 minutes, but it told so much story and so much role over the course of 5 minutes that I've seen in any of the newer Star Wars. So maybe that's like that grittiness that just like isn't there. But I don't know. I kept on thinking of Star Wars for some reason.
Yeah, Barry, you said you haven't watched House of Dragon, right?
No, I'm like mostly through the first episode. And I think I was talking about how I've just been sort of in the headspace of more like lean back, like let it wash over me rather than like lean in and really pay attention. I think I'm pretty distracted these days, like on my phone, even when I'm watching television. And rings like is easier to do that than with dragons.
Yeah.
And like for me, I know that like I was really into Game of Thrones the first couple episodes, but what ended up happening to me is there was so much time in between the seasons, and I didn't read the books, and so for me it was like picking up on very complex multiple storylines and then just feeling like I have to like re-educate myself because I hadn't read the books. And I sort of fell off towards the end of that series. What's interesting is like if we're having this discussion, I think we're like bringing into focus how these two shows tell stories differently. If I had to like categorize the show that we're developing with Derek, I actually think it would maybe you think I'm, disagree with me, please. It feels like it's more on the level of Rings than it is on Dragons.
I would disagree.
But it depends on what layer you're talking about,
yeah,
though,
exactly,
because I think what he's referring to is like the ensembleness, and like here's the thing where I think I know you have a lot to say about that, but let me just say one thing.
Sure.
No, you talk over Elf all you want. I don't mind.
Yeah. That like how the problem is that like with Lord of the Rings by Amazon, they have an entire world to build, right? They have to draw a very big circle of being like, okay, we all know you saw Peter Jackson, but we're actually going to like shoot a comet over the entire like Middle Earth, and you have to watch all these little cutscenes because we need to re-show you like what the world looks like, what our Middle Earth looks like. Like they have to establish those shots because we don't know that yet. We have to like get over what Zay was saying, which is like, I'm not familiar with these like new hobbits, right? Whereas like House of Dragons is like, you already know, like you basically know the world. We're still HBO. You're just like, it's the prequel, but like you still get what's going on here. So we can zoom in on one family in one location. So I do think that our show is going to have the comet that shoots over the entire like map, so you can have those cutscenes. You can show people a lot of different areas. And
I mean,
it's
in the trailer. It's in the trailer.
yeah,
it is.
And you will have to have the kind of this like ensemble of like a lot of different characters being introduced up front because like we're not just going to necessarily follow one family for the whole season. So that's where I think that I would say I can see what Bear is saying, but yeah, no, Elf, go ahead and kind of differentiate.
Well, I'm actually curious. Could you elaborate on what you meant by that, Bear?
Well, I think Dota's kind of hitting it, right? It's like we don't have an entire book series that represents a lot of what's going on, right? I think and that's what's beautiful, right? Because we're doing it a different way, which is why this whole experiment and project is so exciting. I think it's like you have to, the best stories, especially film and TV, do a really good job at balancing sort of world building while creating a sense of intimacy with a number of characters. And so I think we have a lot of ground to cover to just sort of lay the groundwork for what world we're in. Like, what is the Runiverse and what are the rules, and I think we're gonna find out about those rules through a number of sort of perspectives and characters. And I think where it does feel like Dragons is this idea where you're not just going to follow like the same one person or three people. We're going to splinter off, and it's all going to sort of tie together eventually. And so I think that maybe that's where it feels a little bit more Dragons or Game of Thrones.
I guess I'm not sure what you guys mean, because Rings of Power does have a big world. It's already an established world that's massive, and it's been massive for like the past 100 years. And audiences do know what Middle Earth and Numenor and all of that stuff already is.
Well, but I think but I think the difference is they made that show knowing that they will already have the attention of the core fan base of Tolkien. What they're trying to do is create a world that draws in people that maybe weren't as interested in what's past. So they're trying to cast a wider net. Whether that's good or bad can be debated, but I think that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the show or the Runiverse is really analogous to either Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings. If you want my take on exactly what it is in relation to those, it's got the human element and the believability and the realism of Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire. It's got the political intrigue. It's got the well-researched history. It's got just everything that defines George R. R. Martin's work as as just believable and almost historical. That's what I want to carry over to the Runeverse, because as we always say, the Runeverse is a reflection of the real world. So of course that's going to happen in any media expression that we do. In terms of its relation to Lord of the Rings or Rings of Power, I will say that Tolkien's Legendarium is certainly more rich and varied and has like more creatures and more magical elements and more just I don't know, maybe it's a little more fun. It's almost I guess The Hobbit was written for children, so it's got that like whimsical base from which it was developed, and I think the Runeverse certainly has that variety and richness and just gigantic ecosystem of archetypes from which we can create. That's sort of the parallels I see with these two properties. But anyway, do we have a lore reading today? I saw in the Secret Tower that Emma maybe wants to read some lore. I don't know if that's true.
If you still want to, Emma, request up.
Or do we have any other questions, comments, concerns, observations on Rings of Power or House of Dragon? I feel like there's so many opinions out there, but nobody's coming up to offer them.
Yeah. I just hope HBO buys the rights to Lord of the Rings at some point and does their own take. That's all I wish for.
Yeah.
They were actually bought up. They were bought up by a company a month or two ago.
Really?
For Middle Earth was bought by I can't remember the name of the company, but they're like a merchandising company first and foremost.
Oh, interesting.
And they paid like $2-3 billion for it, which I thought strange considering like it was the same exact moment that Rings was launching.
Right.
I'd be interested to see like what their plan is, because they clearly don't have the rights to make a TV show, at least not not in the short term.
Right.
What Magus Wazir, the infamous Magus Wazir, made this meme like almost a year ago, where I think he was like altering some media headline, and he said Bezos is canceling Lord of the Rings and said, "Fuck it, we're doing Forgotten Runes" or something like that. I just thought that was so great at the time.
With Bezos, but it sounds like you really hate him, so I guess I'll cancel it.
Yeah. Margaret, what's up?
Hey guys.
Hey.
Yeah, you're really lucky I didn't do a tweet at Jeff Bezos saying that you all compared him to Morgoth. I love it. Although Peter Thiel is 100% Saruman.
Yes.
I mean, he calls his company Palantir. I mean, what are you going to do? I just wanted to talk about like what I think Forgotten Runes is like in terms of other Legendaria. I don't think it's like Game of Thrones or like Tolkien's.
Sure.
I think it's a little bit more like Rothfuss, who are still waiting to bring the rest of his books out, the King Killer series. And also, stuff like Wheel of Time, Malazan, Book of the Fallen, some really classic stuff. But the other one that I thought of, which is actually really schlocky, but is a really deep world, is Anne McCaffrey's Pern series. Because, because that has magic, but then at the bottom is the science fiction origin of the entire world. And so when I'm wandering around looking for those frickin' frogs and I'm seeing crashed airplanes and stuff, that made me think a little bit about the kind of origins of some of this magic, the science fiction physics. So that was just my thoughts. Yeah, that's basically all I had to say.
I agree with you. The other one that comes, I think, that falls into that bucket is Arcane on Netflix, the Riot Games show. If I'm not sure if you've seen that.
I still need to watch that.
That show is amazing.
It's so good. I'm watching it for a second time right now.
Yeah, I watched it, Elf. It's really good.
Yeah. Okay.
We had a couple meetings with one of the executive producers on that show. He was like one of the first
4 or 5 employees at Riot, and then ended up sort of really leading the charge on that show. And it was just so interesting to hear sort of the story behind how that came to be, and how they wanted to represent, that IP of League, but make it feel standing on its own. And gosh, I just visually, it's beautiful. Every frame, if I had a wall big enough, I would frame every frame and put it up on the wall. It's so gorgeous, but it balances that magic and technology, I think, really well.
So well. The style is, I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, when I imagine the Blue Wizards, I imagine like the Magitech they use in Arcane for sure.
Hell yeah.
Well,
damn, sounds good. Okay. Emma, welcome to Wizard Wednesday. I think this might be the first time you've come up.
Emma.
Yeah, this is my first time.
Welcome. Do you have a lore reading for us today?
I have something random if you guys don't have anything specific you want to hear.
Let's hear something random.
Yeah. Okay, cool. This is for Wizard 6888, Archmagician Aldous. I think this is a good one for all the Star Wars talk we were just going through. Have you ever heard the triumph of Archmagician Aldous? I thought not. It's not a story the wood nymphs would tell you. It's a gnome legend, a pretty awesome one at that. So, who is Aldous, you ask? Fabulous question. He was the greatest gnome magus to have ever lived. Well, he's still alive, if we're being quite honest. The thing is, Aldous went off the deep end many, many moons ago, so the story goes, and no one's really sure where he buggered off to. But before buggering off, he really left behind quite a legacy. Though a gnome, he only ever spoke in Kobold and regularly kept Kobold companions, much to the chagrin of literally every other gnome. Kobolds were known for snacking on gnomes, and Aldous showed no remorse for those that got munched on. So you can imagine many gnomes got ganked. He was also the foremost expert on mating rituals of a very specific species of symbiote. While there was none in the realm even remotely interested in this knowledge, he diligently set forth, determined not to let a thing like necessary research get in the way. He never did publish his findings, but he was trusted at his word. What really made Aldous special was the love he had for his family above all else. And though his offspring were also kobolds and tended to eat everything, he was quite proud of them and would often show them off to friends and other gnomes. This may or may not have resulted in a few large-scale war among the gnomes, but what's a little bloodshed in the name of your kobold family? It's very important to note that even though Aldous was very loyal to his kobold compatriots, the kobolds as a species really weren't too fond of him either. In many kobold villages, there was a wanted sign with his face, often insisting dead, not alive. Eventually, Aldous would go on to settle down in the fungal forests of the Fae, and while he wasn't really welcome in the Fae, his kobold companions made sure no one else would get close enough to complain, overall establishing quite a fantastic legacy and giving gnomes, or giving them something. Really, the question is, who wasn't Aldous? That's
okay.
it.
There are several things I love about this piece of lore. Number one, the use of the phrase bugger off, excellent. And I believe you also said ganked. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay, well done. Yeah, I love. I was telling the comic writer this today. I'm really into this introducing just like alternative vernacular into the Runeverse.
Yes.
I would love for everybody to do that as much as possible. Also, I love that you are bringing gnomes into this lore, because I'm going to assume you're not talking about fur gnomes. You're talking about more the traditional gnomes.
Yeah, I was commissioned to write this, and he had a gnome head, so I went with it.
Okay. So is it is fur gnomes then?
No,
Just
it's a
gnomes.
traditional gnome.
Traditional gnome.
Wait, do we have a gnome head in the collection?
Yeah,
Oh.
check the Secret Tower.
Man, I know nothing about the Runeverse. Okay, no,
No, it's
been
his head,
obsessed with gnomes
Sandman.
lately.
I might have just made it up, but listen, we'll go with it.
Okay. And then thirdly, I just, any drama between kobolds and gnomes and fur gnomes and goblins, like the funnier characters of the Runeverse is just excellent content. And I've loved that you've inserted your wizard into the middle of all this drama.
Yeah, I love that kobolds eat gnomes. It makes sense, right, Jesse?
Yeah, definitely. Every Saturday.
Yeah. Emma, awesome. Thank you. That was an excellent Genesis lore piece. So yeah, come back anytime. And with that, I believe Wizard Wednesday is over. This has been Elf, Dota, Bear Snake, Zelasol, Jitsi, Lorepunk, Emma, Loch Ness, Gnomes, Kobolds, the three Fs, channeling out from the Quantum Downs. Gian.